Hey, what is up guys? I'm KBHD here, and this is the 2016 MacBook Pro with Touch Bar. A very expensive, but very interesting laptop. Kind of fits right in with 2016. So there's plenty of new things about it and plenty that you might not even care about. One of the things is the new Apple logo on the back, that little metal one. It doesn't glow anymore. You might not care, but I think this was the last glowing Apple logo before they replaced that. And it's a slightly new aesthetic, pretty similar to last year, so again, you might not care, but this is actually a big deal when it comes to the story of this laptop. All of this generation's MacBook Pros are thinner and in a smaller footprint than last year's. And they're now all in this very boxy, sharp shape. Like the edges are literally sharp. I kind of like the aesthetic. Even if you don't like this as like your favorite laptop, you still got to admit that the metal unibody construction kind of makes all plastic and rubber type laptops feel a lot more cheap. So at least you might feel like you're getting your money's worth when you pick it up and hold it. Now, I don't know who's asking for a thinner MacBook Pro, but I can say, as someone who carries it in a backpack all the time, having it be a little bit lighter is actually kind of nice. But that's pretty much the only design change on the outside that'll differentiate it from last year. Most of the character of this laptop is on the inside. So inside, the display is new, the keyboard is new, the trackpad is new, the speakers are, pretty much everything is new. The display is great. It may be my favorite part of the whole laptop. It gets brighter than before, up to about 500 nits, so pretty insane levels of brightness, and I rarely need to max it out, even when I'm outside. It's the same resolution as before, but it now supports a wider P3 color gamut, so it's a pretty great looking Retina display. The new keyboard moves to the second generation butterfly switch keys, and these definitely take some getting used to. I originally preferred, the quieter, deeper travel chiclet style keys from last year's machine again, but after using it for a few weeks, I've gotten super used to these keys and I don't mind it. The lesser travel is still kind of weird with the arrow keys being all bunched up in the corner, but everything else is fine, and I type just as fast on this as last year now. And the trackpad is now huge. Like, I don't even think you understand. It's super massive. It's nearly the bottom half of the laptop. It's bigger than most smartphones, bigger than most people's whole hands. So on one hand, it's nice to have because such a huge surface will let you take the mouse from corner to corner without lifting your hand. So I guess it solves that problem. But on the other hand, palm rejection isn't quite as good, and there's still times where I touch the trackpad by accident, and that kind of gets annoying. So this is definitely something that I haven't completely gotten used to, but I welcome it. The new speakers flanking the keyboard are pretty good, but I think maybe I expected them to be like way better because of how good they were on the little tiny 12-inch MacBook. But actually, the grill on the sides of the speakers is actually a bit of an illusion. The speaker itself is only, a small half-inch circle near the bottom, but they still sound very good and get very loud for a laptop. And then, of course, above the keyboard, replacing the previous row of function keys is the new touch bar. I'm gonna go out on a limb and say it's actually really cool. It's not the touchscreen laptop that some people wanted, but I've never really liked touchscreen laptops because it always seems like I'm pressing against a hinge and typing and using that. It just doesn't seem natural to me. It's also a little bit more fatiguing to be up here instead of down here. But that's just me. So what is the touch bar? The touch bar is a 1085 by 30 resolution OLED touchscreen that sits above the keyboard and displays a customizable group of buttons and controls depending on what app you have open. So the two things I would immediately be concerned about are viewing angles and fingerprints. Viewing angles because you never really look directly down at the touch bar. You're always looking at it at a sort of an angle. And fingerprints because it's a touchscreen. So the viewing angle they actually did a really good job with. It's pretty much never difficult to read. Brightness is great, clarity is great, and it's a matte finish, so it also does a really good job with fingerprints. And speaking of fingerprints, all the way to the right of the touch bar is a power button with a Touch ID sensor on top. So this is a fingerprint reader. This is awesome. I've gotten super used to doing Touch ID purchases, and especially logging in when waking up the machine. It makes typing a normal password in seem super inconvenient, so I really, really like the fingerprint sensor. So then the rightmost section of the touch bar is a persistent set of keys that always shows up. So you can kind of memorize their position. This set is customizable through the touch bar settings, so I replaced the usual Siri button with a spotlight search because I use that way more than Siri. And you can expand it with an arrow to show the entire normal set of function keys. It would also be kind of weird if those are always 2 taps away, so you can also just touch and drag along those controls with 1 touch. So it's not extra presses to get to things like brightness and volume. They're still 1 tap away like they were when the whole thing was there. But then with some Apple apps, you get new functionality, new buttons to show up in the middle. So if you're in an app that doesn't support the touch bar, it's just a big blank space. And there are plenty of apps that don't support the touch bar that I'm waiting for an update for, But since Apple has had time to work on it, they've developed their own apps for the MacBook Pro to work with it. So since it's a super wide thing, it sort of works well for like sliders or a timeline. So in QuickTime Player, you can quickly and really smoothly scroll through a video you're watching. So scrubbing is really neat. And in the Photos app, for example, it becomes this slider for scrolling through all your pictures or videos in a library. In Safari is definitely where I think it's the best though. So in normal browsing, you have, your typical buttons, your back button, your search button for a new URL, your new tabs, and then in the middle you get some tab switching, so you can switch between the open tabs you have open and preview them a little bit. You can't actually see what's on the little tabs, but you get the idea. Now, anytime you have a video of any kind opened in Safari, the middle of the touch bar turns into a video scrubber, just like in QuickTime. So if you're in a YouTube video, for example, scrubbing with your finger along the bar is way more fun than dragging with the mouse. You can even scroll through Instagram videos, back and forth, rewinding and everything. I don't think you can do that anywhere else. So it's great in Safari, and it's also legitimately useful in Final Cut Pro. So I'm a Final Cut editor, and there are some shortcuts that it puts there that are actually useful and really faster than what I would have been doing with the mouse. Like the ability to use a single button touch to add audio fades to the beginning and end of any specific clip just by touching the bar is so much nicer than using the mouse. And this is the difference between a gimmick and an actually useful feature, I think. Like, in order to not just be a gimmick, these buttons on the touch bar have to be able to do things that I couldn't already do with like a keyboard shortcut, for example. Pros use keyboard shortcuts. So like in Safari, for example, that new tab button, it's cool that it's there and it makes sense to put it there in Safari, but is taking my hands off the keyboard and reaching up and looking for that button actually going to be faster or more convenient than just keeping my hands on the keyboard and doing Command T? Probably not. So the best thing about the touch bar is when I can quickly do things on it that I couldn't ordinarily do with just the mouse or just the keyboard shortcuts. So like I said, the quick audio trimming in Final Cut is awesome. And there's updates coming to Adobe apps like Premiere and After Effects and Photoshop. But again, those are incoming updates. So the bottom line is this is a MacBook Pro, and a Pro already knows your app's keyboard shortcuts. So I'm hoping when apps like Spotify and Chrome and After Effects get updated, that they actually have useful functional stuff in the touch bar. But until then, most of my time as a pro will be spent on the mouse and keyboard. Oh, and one more thing about the whole Pro name, in case you haven't already noticed, this laptop only has 4 ports. Headphone jack, and then 2 USB Type-C on one side and 2 USB Type-C on the other. So naturally, there's a bunch of controversy over this decision, but think of it this way. USB Type-C is the future, right? Like that's why we get so hyped for new smartphones to have that port. We want new tablets to have it, new devices, etc. Laptops are a little bit more than that, so they take a little while. They're a bit down the line. That's more of the future. These adapters, these dongles, are like our bridge to the future. And they suck now. I know, I hate using adapters. They're ugly, they're an extra expense, you lose them, etc., etc. But if we imagine a future where every laptop has these super high-end, super high data throughput, high-powered, reversible, badass port, we're gonna have to cross that bridge eventually. Now, it's one thing to just change the port on a phone. If it's USB Type-C, you just need a charger. So if you include that Type-C charger in the box, the user is set. But if it's a laptop, there's a little more that we do with laptops than just charge. Luckily, this is Apple we're talking about, so these laptops will be everywhere. They're gonna sell, they'll be out there no matter what. So when Apple comes out with their new laptop and it has a bunch of USB Type-C ports in it, if you're an accessory maker, it's in your best interest now to make as many good USB Type-C accessories as possible and as good as possible to make the most money. So we're starting to see things like really good USB Type-C mobile SSDs, like this Samsung T3 drive I just started carrying, and this really good USB Type-C monitor like the LG 5K display. I made a video about that. There's a new USB Type-C Red reader and even a USB Type-C headphones now. But it's definitely not 100% converted yet. So if there's something you want to keep using where there's no USB Type-C version, you need an adapter. And almost nobody is living an entirely USB Type-C life yet. Like that's definitely in the future. So we're still crossing that bridge. But that might be enough of a reason right there not to buy this generation, and I totally get that. But as someone who's sort of on the bleeding edge of tech a lot, and this happens to me a lot, I'm kind of willing to make it work. That being said, the omission of an SD card slot is terrible. So many cameras, so many pro accessories use SD cards. That wouldn't have been that hard. That's just kind of my only gripe. I would have also liked to have seen maybe a couple more USB Type-C ports. Like I would have been really happy with 6. Also, RIP MagSafe. It was great while we had it. Anyway, at the end of the day, the 2016 MacBook Pro is a different animal, but the same beast.
What the f does that mean, Kobe Bryant?
It still has everything sealed in. It still has all the RAM and SSDs soldered or glued to the motherboard. It's still pretty much not upgradable at all like before, unfortunately. The battery life on the 13-inch is still pretty good. The battery life on the 15-inch is still not that good. The new chips are great, and the SSD performance is godlike, which is great for mobile photo and video editing and anything that requires moving large files around. But overall performance isn't going to shock you. It's pretty much around in line with the bar set last year. I actually would have expected a little bit better in terms of quality control. Not a lot has happened to my machines, but I've seen, especially on Twitter, a lot of things everywhere from just the unresponsive touch bar graphics showing up on the display, something weird like that, to like a full-on graphics meltdown. Again, none of that has happened to my machines, but it's kind of weird to see it so often. It's kind of strange. But here's the bottom line with this laptop for me. Is it worth the price? No. This thing is definitely overpriced, for sure. Would I still buy it again? Yeah, I really enjoy it. I really like it. I'm not the average person. The average person doesn't make a financial decision like this, and I don't think this laptop is a smart financial decision right now. But if you're looking at a new MacBook Pro, maybe hold out for the 2017 version with more USB Type-C accessories available and just skip over that bridge. Either way, that is it. Thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you guys in the next one. Peace.